And we're back. We just covered Genghis Khan's early childhood, rise to power, and the Mongolian war machine. Speaking of war, fantastic generals such as yourself had to have a favorite tactic. Care to elaborate?
Sure. First of all, death to our enemies. But then I would send in my cavalry, have them feign defeat and draw the enemy near, and then send in an even larger force to crush them.
Awesome. So this tactic obviously allowed you to conquer many cities, but you never lived in any of them. Where is your capital?
Karakakor. I'll invite the wisest and cleverest to live among me. There, I will meet and learn from Confucian scholars how to rule China, Muslim engineers to improve trade, and Taoist holy men who were supposed to make me immortal, but failed miserably.
So, although you're considered a culturalist and a savage, you were open to many ideas and wanted a world where everyone could live in peace. What were some of the unifying forces of your rule?
Well, I enforced a common language and legal code. Kind of helped things a lot.
That's good. Since these holy men of yours couldn't make you immortal, you must be planning for the future. Did you pass on any wisdom to your sons?
I am full of nothing but wisdom. I warned them not to fear over the spoils of the Empire, for the Empire must stand strong.
A special thank you to Mr. Khan. And with that, I'm Jeffrey Taylor, bringing you this exclusive interview only on MNR. Back to you, Laura.
Thank you, Jeffrey. That was really interesting. And now it's Susan with the weather. Thanks, Laura. In 1207, the Mongol expansion started with the takeover of the Tangut Kingdom of Xixia in northwest China. They continued north to conquer the Qin Empire, where they will run into trouble because of Qin's defenses. But they soon adapt, which then helped the making of the siege weapons, such as battering rams, catapults, and bamboo rockets. Once they established a stronghold up in the north, they continued conquest west to conquer the Karakataki Empire by 1219. Genghis Khan then demanded that Muhammad Shah II, who was the Turkic ruler of the Khwarazm Empire. The war to take over the Khwarazm Empire lasted 2 years, and by the time it was over, the empire was practically in ruins. In the last year of Genghis' life, he turned back east to destroy the Xixia and the Qin Empire. By the time Khan died, the Mongol Empire stretched from east of Persia all the way to North China coast. Later, the empire will break into 4 parts: the Golden Horde and 3 others. And with that, I'm Susan Stormcloud, wishing you a bright day. Back to you, Laura.
Well, it must be time for the open letter. An open letter to Genghis Khan's descendants. Oh, but first let's check what's in the secret compartment today. Oh, a noisemaker and champagne poppers. Stan, you know I suck at these. What's all this for? Oh, it's because it's a birthday party! Yay! Happy birthday to Genghis Khan's descendants. How do I know it's your birthday, Genghis Khan's descendants? Because every day is your birthday. Because right now on the planet Earth there are 16 million direct descendants of Genghis Khan, meaning that every day is the birthday of 43,000 of them. So good news, Genghis Khan. Your empire might be gone, but your progeny lives on, and on, and on, and on. Happy birthday! Best wishes, John Green. Unfortunately for the Mongols, those guys weren't always working together because Genghis Khan failed to create a single political unit out of his conquests. Instead, after Genghis' death, the Mongols were left with 4 really important empires called Khanates. The Yuan dynasty in China, the Ilkhanate in Persia, the Chagatai Khanate in Central Asia, and the Khanate of the Golden Horde in Russia. If you remember all the way back to the Hellenistic period, this is similar to what happened to another good general who wasn't much for administration, Alexander the Great. Also, neither of them ever conquered India. The Mongols succeeded primarily because of their military skill. Genghis Khan's army, which never numbered more than 130,000, was built on speed and archery, just like this guy. Mongol mounted archers were like super fast tanks compared to the foot soldiers and knights they were up against. But wait, all the military history nerds are saying, once people knew the Mongols were coming, why didn't they just hole up in castles and forts? It's not like the Mongols had flying horses. Except they did. They didn't? Stan, why are you always making history boring? So the Mongols apparently didn't have flying horses, but they were uncommonly adaptable. So even though they'd never seen a castle before they started raiding, they became experts at siege warfare by interrogating prisoners. And they also adopted gunpowder, probably introducing it to Europeans, and they even built ships so they could attack Japan. That might have worked too, except there happened to be a typhoon. Also, people were terrified of the Mongols. Often, cities would surrender the moment the Mongols arrived just to escape slaughter. But of course, that only happened because there were occasions when the Mongols did, slaughter entire towns. So with all that background, let us return to the question of Mongol awesomeness. First, 5 arguments for awesome. 1. The Mongols really did reinvigorate cross-Eurasian trade. The Silk Road trading routes that had existed for about 1,000 years by the time the Mongols made the scene had fallen into disuse, but the Mongols valued trade because they could tax it, and they did a great job of keeping their empire safe. It was said that a man could walk from one end of the Mongol Empire to the other with a gold plate on his head without ever fearing being robbed. 2. The Mongols increased communication through Eurasia by developing this Pony Express-like system of way stations with horses and riders that could quickly relay information. It was called the Yam system, and it also included these amazing bronze passports which facilitated travel. 3. Another thing that traveled along Mongol trade routes was cuisine. For example, it was because of the Mongols that rice became a staple of the Persian diet, which I mention entirely because I happen to like Persian food. 4. The Mongols forcibly relocated people who were useful to them, like artists and musicians, and especially administrators. As you can imagine, the Mongols weren't much for administrative tasks, like keeping records, so they found people who were good at that stuff and just moved them around the empire. This created the kind of cross-cultural pollination that world historians these days get really excited about. And 5, the Mongols were almost unprecedentedly tolerant of different religions. They themselves were shamanists, believing in nature spirits, but since their religion was tied to the land from which they came, they didn't expect new people to adopt it, and they didn't ask them to. So you could find Muslims and Buddhists and Christians and people of any other religion you can think of prospering throughout the Mongol Empire. And it's that kind of openness that has led historians to go back and reevaluate the Mongols, seeing them as kind of a precursor to modernity. But there is another side of the story that we should not forget, so here are 5 reasons why the Mongols might not be so great. 1. Here is Genghis Khan's definition of happiness. The greatest happiness is to vanquish your enemies, to chase them before you, to rob them of their wealth, to see those dear to them bathed in tears, to clasp to your bosom their wives and daughters. Off topic, but if that quote rings a bell, it might be because Oliver Stone blatantly plagiarized Genghis Khan in the movie Conan the Barbarian. 2 is an extension of 1. The Mongols were seriously brutal conquerors. I mean, not uniquely brutal, but still. The Mongols often destroyed entire cities, and most historians estimate the number they killed to be in the millions. 3, their empire didn't last. Within 80 years, they'd left China and been replaced by a new dynasty, the Ming, and in Persia, they blended in so completely that by the 15th century, they were totally unrecognizable. I mean, they'd even taken up agriculture. Agriculture, the last refuge of scoundrels who want to devote their lives to working instead of scoodly pooping. They also weren't particularly interested in artistic patronage or architecture. I mean, your palace may last forever, but my yurt can go anywhere. 5, the Mongols were probably responsible for the Black Death. By opening up trade, they also opened up vectors for disease to travel, in the case of the plague, via fleas infected with Yersinia pestis. And at least according to one story, the Mongols intentionally spread the plague by catapulting their plague-ridden cadavers over the walls of Kaffa in the Crimea. While this primitive act of biological warfare might have happened, it's unlikely to be what actually spread the plague. More likely, it was the fleas on the rats in the holds of Black Sea ships that were trading with Europe, but that trade only existed because of the Mongols. All right, Stan, one last time, cue the Mongoltage. So the Mongols promoted trade, diversity, and tolerance, and they also promoted slaughter and senseless destruction. And what you think about the Mongols ends up saying a lot about you. Do you value artistic output over religious diversity? Is imperialism that doesn't last better or worse than imperialism that does? And are certain kinds of warfare inherently wrong? If you think those are easy questions to answer, then I haven't been doing my job. Regardless, I look forward to reading your answers in comments. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.
Thank you, Susan, and now to Jennifer Smith with some Mongolian works.
Thanks, Laura. Hello, I'm Jennifer Smith, and I'm going to be analyzing these 10 Mongolian documents. The first one is Genghis Khan, and he is one of the primary leaders of the Mongols. And in this picture, he's depicted as very serious, so you can include that he's a very serious ruler and he takes his job very seriously. And that's what contributed him to being the great ruler that he was towards the people. And in the picture, he's wearing a white robe and he has like his jewelry and his beard that most men had during this time period. The next one shows the diversity of the Mongols. Like, there's all these different people that have different colored robes, and there's like the different tents and horses. And the horses were significant to them because they helped them in their conquest. And the next one shows their cavalry.